Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for women, and nearly 45% of women over 20 are actually living with some form of heart disease. So it's incredibly crucial to talk about women's heart health. We're joined right now by Angela Creason to discuss how we can all take steps towards better cardiovascular health. Angela, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we hear time and time again that heart disease, heart issues, they behave differently or they manifest differently in women than they do in men. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to you personally about your journey, because you actually bring a personal part of this to the table today. So I want to begin by you sharing your personal story and how it kind of shaped your approach to health.
Sure. So when I was 19, I was diagnosed with what they call a bicuspid aortic valve with severe aortic regurgitation. So I had so your valve is 3 leaflets. Think of like a Mercedes-Benz emblem.
Okay.
Mine had 2 of those little pieces fused together sometime in my childhood. So I was being treated for that for a long time. Got pregnant with my boys. My second son, I started to experience problems that were related to the valve. So I wasn't seeking help immediately. When I was 19, I was told by the doctor that I was never going to have children. I was going to have open heart surgery.
Oh,
so
wow.
At 19, and I went to the appointment by myself. At 19, I thought, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm going to have kids. I'm not going to have open heart surgery. I'm not going to listen to this guy. Mm-hmm. Well, lo and behold, pregnant with my second son. First pregnancy went fine. Second pregnancy was fine. Had a little bit of swelling, nothing major. Mm-hmm. Went into labor with him and had really high blood pressure, like extraordinarily high. They had to figure out why it was so high, bring it down. Not a complicated delivery. My son was born healthy. Mm-hmm. Then I started to experience symptoms from the actual problem about a month or 2 after. I would be sitting just like this and feel like somebody tipped me upside down. And that would start happening pretty frequently. Mm. So I thought, oh, that darn doctor was right.
Yeah.
So I went and talked to a doctor again, and they confirmed, yeah, it's still there. It's still, aortic regurgitation. It's severe. You've got a sufficient leak that we need to keep an eye on. He said, no worry for surgery right now. He said maybe 50s, 60s is when we'll have to look at that. So okay. I started my treatment plan. I would go in for an echocardiogram twice a year, see the doctor once a year, just to make sure that there wasn't any enlargement of my heart, which would mean that it was getting stressed from the undue amount of pumping it was going to have to do from that aortic regurgitation. Everything was fine, and this was 2011. Actually, I'm sorry, 2010, I was seeing my regular doctor, and she said, everything looks so good that, oh my gosh, I messed that up.
No, it's fine. So everything looked good, but then what happened though? Because at that point, you have some point where you're like, okay, you're trying to manage this condition that you've had for a while, right? But then all of a sudden, it wasn't okay.
Right. So I was seeing her for my last echocardiogram, or the last known one I was going to have with her. Yeah. And she said, everything looks so good. We don't need to do this twice a year. Let's just go to once a year because everything's looking so steady. It's not necessary to do this twice a year. Yeah. So this was October of 2013. And the next January, laying in bed one morning, had gone out with some girlfriends the night before. My husband was asking me how my night went, and I was reaching for my phone to show him some pictures of my friends. Dropped my phone on the ground, and he said I never answered. He said it was really strange. It was shaking, kind of like this little convulsing. Yeah. And he knew I was being monitored for the heart problem. So he flipped on the light, looked at me. This is just before 6 a.m. in January, so it's still dark out. Yeah. He said, you were white as a ghost. Your eyes were, fully dilated, and he knew something was wrong with my heart immediately. So he called 911 and checked for a pulse, which I didn't have. Oh. And he started CPR. So at that point, my heart had gone into what they call ventricular fibrillation. So it had stopped its regular rhythm, and it was basically quivering because it could not figure out to go back into a regular beat mode. Yeah. He continued CPR for 7 minutes before our local fire department, just at the edge of our subdivision, made it to the house. When they got there, EMTs arrived within maybe a minute or 2 after. They administered 4 shocks on my bedroom floor with no response. Ooh. So at that point, my husband's looking at the guys, what's going on? They said, we don't have anything, man. We don't know what to do. So my husband, of course, starts freaking out at that point. He's really scared, like, this, are you calling it? And one of the supervisors from the EMT said, no, this is, we're going to take her downtown. We're going to take her to the hospital. So they put put me on a gurney and then administered this machine called a Lucas chest compression machine, which does compressions at the beat of 100 beats per minute.
Yeah.
So that was able to keep the CPR compressions going while they maneuvered me downstairs into the ambulance, and we lived in Eagle, so to the Eagle St. Al's. So there, I had 4 more shocks. And finally, 25 minutes later, my heart resumed its normal beat.
So were you clinically, it sounds like that you were maybe even clinically dead for a small moment. And
basically.
they brought you back. My goodness. Okay.
So I was
This is a very traumatic experience.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you've had quite a history with heart health.
Right.
We only have about 30 seconds to a minute left. I want you to share with our viewers, what do you hope they take away from your story, and what do you hope they take seriously when it comes to women's heart health?
Don't ignore any type of symptom that you think could be a problem. Women especially will be the first ones to say, oh, I just hurt my back, or I'm tired, or I don't feel well. Don't listen to that.
We're so focused on taking care of others.
Exactly. If you have any type of heart disease history in your family, see a cardiologist. Get the baseline procedures done, EKG, echo if necessary. Know where you stand with that. Know your blood pressure numbers. You can have a stroke from too high of a blood pressure.
Wow.
People don't really realize these things, so you have to manage all of that stuff. Stress, if you're in a high stress position, work on bringing that down. But again, you've got to talk to a doctor. You've got to stay on top of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've talked to so many physicians, and they're like, we take our dental health pretty seriously. Everyone knows that in the morning you brush, and you brush at night, and some people even brush midday. That's really good on you. However, we need to also be approaching our health the same way, right? We need to know our numbers. We need to make sure we're managing our diet. We need to make sure we're being active. And like you'd mentioned, if you have history in your family, gosh darn it, know what your risk is.
Absolutely.
And talk to your physicians and get on that.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much,
Angela,
for
for telling us your story and being so brave to share that today.
Absolutely.
I know we've impacted some people watching.
I hope so.
You certainly
Learn
did.
CPR, please. It works.
And learn CPR. Angela knows it saved her life. All right, everyone, stick around. We got Opera Idaho in-house and a performance coming up in just a moment.